The sun hung high in the clear blue sky, casting its warm glow over the bustling downtown area. The rhythmic sound of hurried footsteps echoed against the glass and steel of the high-rise buildings. Angela, a woman in her late 30s, moved confidently through the throngs of people, her impeccable navy blazer tailored to perfection and her heels clicking decisively against the pavement. She was on her way to an important meeting, one that could shape the future of her career. A respected federal judge, Angela was well aware of the weight her position carried. She had worked tirelessly to earn her reputation, and today was no different. As she approached the high-rise building that housed her office, she felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was more than just another day at work. It was a chance to advocate for justice, to make a difference in the lives of those who often had none. Her mind raced with thoughts of the cases she was currently presiding over, the lives she had touched, and the changes she hoped to inspire within the judicial system. "Excuse me, Your Honor," a voice called from behind her, breaking her focus. Angela turned slightly, expecting to see a colleague or perhaps a clerk, but instead, she was met with the sight of a police officer approaching her. Officer Blake, clad in his crisp blue uniform, strode with an air of authority that was as imposing as it was misplaced. Blake had been on patrol, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. But as he spotted Angela, a dark shadow of bias clouded his judgment. To him, she was just another woman in a business suit, someone who he felt was out of her element in the city's gritty underbelly. Fueled by his unfounded prejudices, he decided to assert his authority. "Ma'am, can I have a word?" he called out, his tone brusque and dismissive. Angela paused, taken aback by the officer's abruptness. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice calm yet firm. She was not one to back down easily, especially when confronted without cause. "Just wondering what you're doing out here dressed like that," Blake retorted, crossing his arms over his chest. "This isn't a place for someone like you." His words dripped with condescension, and he took a step closer, invading her personal space. Angela raised an eyebrow, her composure unshaken. "I assure you, officer, I am here on official business. I'm a federal judge," she stated, her tone laced with authority. "I expect to be treated with respect." Blake scoffed, dismissing her words with a wave of his hand. "Yeah, right. You think just because you wear a fancy suit, you can walk around here without any consequences? I don't think so." His voice escalated, drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. Angela felt the tension in the air shift. It was already apparent that Blake's demeanor was not one of genuine concern, but rather an aggressive assertion of power. "I'm not looking for trouble, officer. I simply want to go about my day," she replied, her voice steady. "Please let me pass." Blake stepped closer still, his physical presence looming over her. "Not so fast. I need to know what you're really up to. You look suspicious. You could be causing trouble for all I know," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Suspicious? For what reason?" Angela pressed, her patience wearing thin. "I have no criminal intent. I'm just a woman on her way to work." The officer's face twisted in a sneer. "That's exactly what someone who's up to no good would say. Dressed like that, you're just asking for trouble." His hand rested on the holster of his service weapon, a subtle but clear threat that sent a ripple of anxiety through Angela. Despite the rising tension, Angela remained resolute. "I demand to be treated fairly," she asserted, her voice rising slightly. "I have rights, and I expect you to uphold them. And I expect you to comply with my orders." Blake shot back, his arrogance palpable. "You're not above the law just because you wear a judge's robe." Angela's heart raced, but she refused to show fear. "I'm a representative of the law, officer. It is precisely because of my position that I understand the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. You are violating that principle right now." The crowd around them began to take notice, some casting skeptical glances, while a few others pulled out their phones, the bright screens flickering to life. Angela could feel the weight of their eyes, and she knew that the situation was escalating beyond her control. "Why don't you go back to your little courtroom and leave the real work to the police?" Blake barked, his tone dripping with disdain. He took a step forward, his aggression palpable. "You think you're so important, don't you? Important enough to know that I won't be intimidated by you," Angela replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I will not tolerate this kind of behavior from anyone, especially a police officer. You should be protecting and serving the community, not harassing its members." As she spoke, Angela noticed a woman in the crowd, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Someone should intervene," the woman whispered to her companion, her eyes darting between Angela and Blake. "This is ridiculous." But Blake seemed too entrenched in his misguided sense of authority to care about the gathering crowd. "You're making a mistake, lady. You think you can just walk away from this? I can detain you if I want," he warned, his voice low and menacing. Angela took a deep breath, steadying herself against the storm brewing in front of her. "Go ahead, officer. Detain me. But know this. I will not let your prejudice or your abuse of power go unchecked," she said, her voice unwavering. Blake's eyes narrowed, the tension between them crackling like electricity. "You're playing a dangerous game," he replied, his jaw tightening. In that moment, several bystanders began to murmur amongst themselves, their phones still recording the confrontation. The atmosphere thickened with disbelief and concern as they witnessed the blatant display of aggression from a man sworn to protect. "Is he really going to do this?" A voice echoed through the crowd. Angela felt the weight of their eyes on her, and she knew she had to stand her ground. She straightened her posture, reminding herself of the countless cases she had presided over, the people she had fought for. This was her moment to embody the values she held dear: justice, dignity, and the relentless pursuit of truth. "Officer Blake," she said calmly, "you have the power to choose how this ends. You can choose to uphold the law or to abuse it. I hope you choose wisely." The tension hung in the air, thick and heavy, as the crowd watched, breaths held, awaiting the next move in this dangerous game of power and privilege. As the confrontation outside the commercial building escalated, it became impossible for bystanders to ignore the tension in the air. A small crowd began to gather, a mixture of concern and disbelief etched on the faces of those witnessing the scene unfold. Some instinctively reached for their phones, the bright screens illuminating their faces in the late afternoon light as they prepared to capture the moment, while others exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to intervene. "Hey, what's going on?" a young man shouted, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. He had been walking his dog when he first noticed the commotion. The dog, sensing the unease, tugged at the leash, eager to move away from the chaotic scene. "Just keep walking. This doesn't concern you." Officer Blake barked back, his tone laced with authority, as he turned his focus back to Angela. The steely resolve in her gaze didn't waver, even as he loomed over her, his uniform an imposing barrier between her and the onlookers. Angela stood firm, her posture straight and her composure intact. "I'm just asking for respect, officer. There's no need for this aggression," she said, her voice steady. She could feel the weight of the eyes upon her, each one watching, waiting to see how this would unfold. In that moment, she realized she was not only fighting for herself, but also for those who felt powerless in the face of authority. "Respect?" You think you deserve respect. You're just some. Blake started, but Angela interrupted him, her voice rising slightly in urgency. I'm just some woman. Is that how you see me? Angela's words hung in the air, charged with indignation. You don't even know who I am. I deserve the same respect you expect from others. A woman in the crowd, clutching her purse tightly, took a step forward. That's right. You don't get to treat people this way, she shouted, her voice shaking slightly but filled with conviction. The crowd began to murmur in agreement, a ripple of support emanating from those who had begun to recognize the injustice of Blake's behavior. Stay out of this. Blake snapped, his face reddening with anger. He turned back to Angela, his jaw clenched. You're in my way, and I'm telling you to move. Angela took a deep breath, her heart racing, but her mind clear. She understood the gravity of the moment. You're not acting like a protector right now, officer. You're abusing your power. Think about what you're doing, she pleaded, her voice softer now, trying to reach whatever humanity remained in him. Think about what I'm doing. You're the one causing a scene, he retorted, his bravado faltering as he realized the growing crowd was no longer an indifferent audience. They were a collective force, a chorus of voices that began to rise against him. The young man who had first shouted stepped forward again. You can't just push people around because you wear a badge. That's not how it works. His voice was firm, and it seemed to embolden others around him. Yeah, we're all watching you. Another bystander chimed in, her phone still recording the encounter. You better think twice about what you're doing. For a brief moment, Officer Blake hesitated, glancing at the faces surrounding him. The collective disapproval in their expressions, the stares filled with disbelief, began to chip away at his confidence. But rather than retreating, he chose to double down. I'm in control here. You're all just a bunch of onlookers, he shouted, the desperation in his voice barely masked by his aggression. Angela, sensing the shift in the crowd's dynamic, took another step forward. You're right that you're in control right now. But remember, power is not just about authority. It's about responsibility too, she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. Your actions have consequences. Blake's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, invading Angela's personal space, trying to intimidate her. You think you're so special, don't you? What makes you better than anyone else here? He sneered, his breath hot against her face. The crowd gasped collectively, the tension palpable as they leaned in, witnessing the raw conflict. Angela felt a swell of support from the people around her, but the confrontation was far from over. She maintained her composure, looking Blake directly in the eye. It's not about being better. It's about being human, treating each other with dignity, regardless of our roles. Dignity, Blake scoffed, taking a step back, trying to regain his posture. You think you can lecture me about dignity? You're just an inconvenience. In that moment, as Blake's arrogance peaked, he shoved Angela hard, sending her stumbling backward. A gasp echoed through the crowd, the shock reverberating like a wave. The phones continued to record, capturing every moment as Angela fought to steady herself. Hey, you can't do that, someone yelled, anger boiling over among the bystanders. The atmosphere shifted dramatically from passive observation to active outrage as the crowd began to close in, surrounding Blake and Angela like a living wall of witnesses. Angela regained her footing, her heart racing, but she refused to show fear. She stood tall, her eyes blazing with determination. That was uncalled for, she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. You can't use your authority to hurt others. Stay back, Blake shouted, clearly rattled now, his bravado fading as he looked around at the encroaching crowd. The murmurs of disbelief and anger grew louder, with individuals stepping forward, challenging the officer's actions. Someone needs to report this. This is abuse. A man cried out, his fists clenched. You don't get to treat people like this. Angela, feeling the adrenaline coursing through her veins, turned to the crowd. I need your help, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil. We can't let this go unchallenged. We have to hold them accountable. Yeah, came a shout from back. We're with you. The crowd began to rally, and the atmosphere was electric with a sense of collective strength. People began pulling out their phones again, ready to document the injustice, ready to stand up. Blake, realizing the tide was turning against him, took a step back, his bravado crumbling. The crowd was no longer just a backdrop. They were now an active force, and he was no longer the uncontested authority. As he glanced around, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Angela took a deep breath, ready to address not only Blake, but the crowd as well. We have the power to stand against this kind of behavior, she called out, her voice rising above the noise. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us. We deserve to feel safe and respected. As the crowd erupted in support, the air thickened with resolve. The tension was palpable, a standoff between authority and the collective voice of the people, all waiting to see what would happen next. As the confrontation escalated outside the towering commercial building, the air crackled with tension. Officer Blake, his face flushed with aggression, stood over Angela, who remained resolute despite the danger looming. The bystanders, a mix of office workers and passers-by, formed a semicircle around the unfolding drama, their phones raised to capture every moment. Some whispered among themselves, their expressions a blend of disbelief and concern, while others shouted words of encouragement for Angela. Suddenly, a fellow officer, Officer Harris, arrived on the scene. He was a few years younger than Blake and had always looked up to him. However, as he approached, uncertainty clouded his features. Blake, what's going on here? He asked, glancing between Blake and Angela. The tension in his voice was palpable, and he could sense the unease radiating from the crowd. Blake, still brimming with bravado, turned to Harris. Just teaching this lady a lesson about respect, he sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. She thinks she can just walk around here without following the rules. He gestured dismissively at Angela, who stood unwavering, her chin lifted proudly. Angela's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. Officer, I'm not here to cause trouble. I deserve to be treated with dignity, just like anyone else. Your actions are unjustifiable. The strength in her voice caught the attention of several bystanders, who began murmuring in agreement. Officer Harris shifted his weight uneasily, glancing at the growing crowd. Maybe we should all just cool down a bit, he suggested tentatively, trying to defuse the situation. Let's talk this over without. Without what? Without him shoving me again. Angela interjected, her eyes flashing with indignation. She could feel the support of the crowd behind her, their silent solidarity giving her strength. I'm not going to be intimidated. Not now, not ever. The crowd started to rally behind her, voices rising in protest. Let her go, shouted a woman in a business suit, her phone still recording. You can't treat someone like that. Others echoed her sentiments, chanting for justice, their frustration turning into a collective roar. Blake, caught off guard by the sudden shift in momentum, glared at the crowd. This is none of your business. Step back, he barked, his bravado faltering as he took a step toward Angela, his hand clenched into a fist. You don't know who you're messing with. Angela stood her ground, the weight of her role as a federal judge pressing firmly on her shoulders, though she hadn't yet revealed her identity. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, she retorted, her voice steady and unwavering. "And I refuse to allow your abuses of power to go unchecked." The tension thickened in the air, with bystanders recording everything, their phones capturing the injustice in real time. "This isn't right," a man shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're supposed to protect us, not bully us." As the crowd's outrage grew, it became clear that they were no longer mere spectators. They were witnesses to a confrontation that had morphed into a fight for dignity and respect. Angela felt a swell of determination within her. She couldn't let Blake's aggression go unchallenged, not when the eyes of the community were upon them, recording the incident for posterity. Blake's expression twisted with anger, and he turned back to Harris, desperation creeping into his voice. "You need to back me up here. This is getting out of control." His authority was fraying, and he could feel it slipping through his fingers. Harris hesitated, caught between loyalty to his colleague and the undeniable truth of what was unfolding before him. The faces of the bystanders, filled with concern and anger, weighed heavily on his conscience. "Blake, maybe we should just let her go. This doesn't look good." Before Blake could respond, Angela seized the moment, her voice ringing out clearer than ever. "You may think you have power over me, Officer Blake, but power is not about wearing a badge or a uniform. Real power lies in standing up against injustice, no matter the cost." Her words hung in the air, igniting a spark of courage within the crowd. As if on cue, the murmurs of recognition began to swirl among the onlookers. "Wait, isn't she?" one woman whispered, her eyes widening in realization. "I think I've seen her on the news." Another bystander chimed in. "She's a judge. Angela Martin. I can't believe it." The whispers turned into gasps, and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The realization of Angela's true identity spread like wildfire, leaving Blake scrambling to regain control. "Shut up," Blake barked at the crowd, but the urgency in his voice was now laced with fear. He could sense the tide turning against him, and the last vestiges of his arrogance began to crumble. Angela felt a wave of empowerment surge through her as the crowd's support solidified around her. She took a deep breath, channeling her inner strength. "You don't intimidate me, officer. You've abused your position today, and there will be consequences for your actions. Injustice cannot go unpunished." The crowd erupted in a chorus of approval, their energy pulsating with a newfound sense of purpose. Phones continued to record, capturing not just the confrontation, but the spirit of defiance that was igniting within the community. Angela's calm demeanor, now imbued with an unyielding determination, radiated strength, inspiring those around her to stand firm against oppression. Blake, realizing that his facade was crumbling, glanced around at the crowd, his confidence eroding. "You all don't know what you're talking about," he shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. The tide had turned. The power he once wielded so carelessly was slipping away, and he felt the weight of the community's collective gaze weighing heavily upon him. Angela took a step forward, her voice steady and unwavering. "I am a judge, and I will not allow this to happen to anyone else. We deserve better, and I will fight for accountability. You may have tried to silence me today, but I refuse to be silenced any longer." In that moment, something shifted in the crowd. They were no longer just witnesses. They were participants in a movement for justice. As Angela stood tall, the weight of the world on her shoulders, she felt the unbreakable bond of shared humanity and resolve that connected her to those around her. The camera lenses captured every moment, the anger, the courage, the defiance, each frame a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And as the crowd rallied behind Angela, their voices echoing through the urban streets, a new chapter in the fight for justice was just beginning, one that would not be forgotten. As the tension in the air thickened, Officer Blake's aggression reached its peak. He stood before Angela, chest puffed out, a menacing figure against the backdrop of the bustling downtown. The crowd, a mix of shocked commuters and curious onlookers, held their collective breath, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging in the atmosphere. Just as Blake prepared to push Angela again, a voice broke through the murmurs. "Angela! Angela Thompson!" The shout rang out, clear and authoritative. Heads turned, and the crowd began to buzz with recognition. Angela's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she quickly regained her composure. The voice belonged to a former law clerk of hers, a young man named David. He had been passing by and recognized her instantly. The name echoed through the crowd, igniting a wave of realization. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as they processed the revelation that the woman standing defiantly before Blake was not just an ordinary citizen, but a federal judge, known for her unwavering commitment to justice. Blake's face drained of color. The arrogance that had fueled his actions moments ago evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror at the implications of his mistake. His eyes darted around as if searching for an escape from the reality that was closing in on him. The murmurs in the crowd shifted from shock to outrage, and the once silent witnesses began to rally behind Angela. "Did you hear that? She's a judge," someone shouted from the back. "What the hell are you doing, Blake?" The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. The crowd, previously passive observers, now surged with energy, emboldened by the knowledge of Angela's true identity. They began to step closer, forming a protective barrier around her, their phones still recording every moment. Angela, sensing the change, stood taller. The authority she wielded as a judge was not just in her title. It surged through her as she faced Blake. "You have no right to treat me or anyone else this way," she said, her voice steady and resonant. "You've abused your power, Officer Blake." The crowd cheered her on, their voices rising in support. "That's right. You're not above the law," shouted a woman in a red jacket, her fists clenched in outrage. Blake stumbled back, the weight of the crowd's anger pressing down on him. "I was just doing my job," he stammered, but the words fell hollow and unconvincing. "Doing your job?" Angela scoffed, her patience thinning. "Is this how you define your duty? By assaulting an innocent woman on the street? You think the badge gives you the right to act with impunity?" The crowd murmured in agreement, and a young man stepped forward, eyes blazing with indignation. "You're supposed to protect us, not intimidate us. This is unacceptable." Angela took a deep breath, channeling the power of her position and the strength of her convictions. "This is not just about me," she continued, her voice rising above the crowd. "This is about accountability. We must demand better from those who are sworn to protect us. Today, we stand together against abuse of power." The energy in the crowd shifted once more, this time towards solidarity. People began chanting, "Justice for Angela! Justice for all!" Their voices echoed through the streets, a powerful chorus demanding respect and change. Blake, now visibly shaken, looked around helplessly. The realization that he was no longer the one in control sank in. His world, once defined by authority, was crumbling before him. He took a hesitant step back, glancing toward his fellow officers who had arrived earlier, but they were just as shocked by the unfolding scene. The other officer, a woman named Officer Reyes, stood frozen, clearly torn between her duty to her colleague and the undeniable truth of the situation. "Blake, "What are you doing?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with disbelief. "You can't just—" "Shut up," Blake snapped, the anger bubbling back to the surface, but it lacked its earlier conviction. Angela's eyes locked onto his with an intensity that cut through his bravado. "You're making a mistake," she said calmly. "You need to step back. This is not going to end well for you if you continue down this path. You know that." The crowd, emboldened by her words, began to chant louder, their voices intertwining in a rhythm of solidarity. Justice, justice, justice. They had transformed from passive bystanders into an active force for change, the energy palpable as they rallied around Angela. "Listen to them, Blake," Angela urged, her tone firm yet measured. "This isn't just about you or me. This is about creating a community where we can all feel safe, where respect is given to everyone, regardless of their background. You have a choice to make right now." Blake's chest heaved as he processed her words, but the arrogance that had initially fueled him was being replaced by a sense of fear. The realization of the consequences of his actions loomed like a shadow over him. "This isn't over," he muttered, attempting to regain some semblance of authority. "I can't just let you." Angela cut him off. "You've already let it go too far, Officer Blake. It's time to face the consequences of your actions. You can't hide behind your badge when you've crossed this line." The crowd erupted once more in support, their voices rising like a tide, a community united in their demand for accountability. As the chants of "justice for Angela" filled the air, Angela felt a surge of strength. The support of the crowd fortified her resolve, transforming her initial shock into empowerment. She was no longer just a victim of Blake's aggression. She was a beacon of resistance, embodying the fight for dignity and justice that so many had longed for. "Let this be a lesson," she declared, her voice steady and clear. "We will not stand for this. We will hold those in power accountable, and we will not be silenced." With every word, Angela felt the weight of her position as a federal judge and the responsibility that came with it. The crowd leaned in, their faces filled with hope and determination, ready to stand with her against the tide of injustice. Blake, cornered by the reality of the moment, shifted uneasily on his feet, the power he once wielded slipping through his fingers. He had underestimated the woman before him, and the crowd that now encircled her like a shield. The stakes had been raised, and he was no longer the one in control. As the chanting continued, Angela took a step forward, leaning into the strength of the moment. "Together, we can demand change. We can ensure that no one else suffers at the hands of those who are meant to protect us. We must keep fighting." The energy in the air was electric, the crowd's voice a powerful reminder of the strength found in unity. Angela felt it surge through her, and she knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of something much larger than herself. The battle for justice was far from over, but today she had ignited a spark that had the potential to grow into a flame of change. The crowd's energy surged like a tide, voices rising in unison as they chanted for justice. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a mixture of outrage and determination. Angela stood at the center of it all, her composure unwavering despite the chaos surrounding her. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders, but she refused to buckle under the pressure. "Officer Blake," she said, her voice cutting through the din like a knife, "you have abused your power today. You have forgotten the very principles of justice and respect that you are sworn to uphold." The crowd hushed slightly, hanging on her every word. Blake, still reeling from the revelation of Angela's identity, attempted to regain some semblance of control. "I was just doing my job," he stammered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You don't understand the risks we face every day." Angela took a step forward, her gaze piercing. "And you don't understand the risks that come with your badge being a weapon of oppression." You thought you could intimidate me because you saw me as just another woman on the street." She gestured to the onlookers, who were now recording every moment of the confrontation. "But I am not just anyone. I am a federal judge, and I will not allow this to go unpunished." The crowd erupted in supportive cheers, their voices rising again as they repeated her words. "Not just anyone. Not just anyone." The chant echoed down the street, empowering Angela further. She could see the faces of those around her. Many were young, some were elderly, but all shared a common thread of indignation that seemed to bind them together in this moment. A local news crew arrived, their camera crew springing into action, capturing the scene unfolding in real time. The reporter, a woman with striking red hair and a determined expression, rushed toward Angela, microphone in hand. "Can we get your statement on what just happened here?" she asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and empathy. Angela nodded, her resolve strengthening. "This is not just about me," she began, speaking directly into the camera as the crowd fell silent to listen. "This is about holding those in power accountable for their actions. This is about ensuring that no one else has to experience the humiliation and violence that I face today simply because of their gender or appearance. We must demand justice, and we must demand it now." The crew began broadcasting live, the images of Angela standing tall against Officer Blake's aggression quickly spreading across the city and beyond. The reporter nodded along, clearly moved by Angela's words. "You're advocating for justice and accountability in the police force. What do you hope to achieve from this incident?" "I hope to achieve change," Angela replied firmly, her tone resolute. "I plan to pursue legal action against Officer Blake. This cannot stand as a mere footnote in our city's history. We need to create a system where police officers understand that they are not above the law. I want to see reforms that protect citizens from this kind of abuse." As she spoke, the crowd began to rally again, their chants morphing into a powerful call for justice. Accountability. Justice. Now. Angela felt a rush of adrenaline as their voices intertwined, creating a symphony of resistance against injustice. Blake, sensing the tide turning against him, attempted to regain his footing. "You're making a mistake, Judge. You don't know what it's like to be in my shoes." His voice was a desperate plea, but it only fueled the fire in Angela's heart. "On the contrary, officer," she shot back, her words dripping with conviction. "I know exactly what it means to wear a uniform, to uphold the law, and to serve the community. What you did today was not serving. It was an abuse of power. You chose to assault a person rather than protect them, and that is unforgivable." The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, many nodding in agreement with Angela's statement. "This isn't just about one officer. This is systemic. We need to change the way law enforcement interacts with our communities," shouted a man in the front row, raising his fist in solidarity. Angela recognized the movement growing around her, the collective consciousness awakening in real time. "Exactly. This is bigger than any one incident. We need to demand training, oversight, and strict consequences for those who abuse their authority. We need to ensure that our communities feel safe, not threatened." As the crowd began to chant her words, Angela felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Their support was a balm for her spirit, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. She turned back to Blake, who was visibly shaken by the turn of events. His bravado had evaporated, leaving behind a frail figure struggling to justify his actions. "What do you have to say for yourself, officer?" Angela pressed, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him squirm. I was just trying to control the situation," he stuttered, his voice weak. I thought you were a threat." "A threat?" Angela echoed, incredulous. "The only threat here is your inability to see beyond your own biases. You let your prejudices dictate your actions, and now you will face the consequences." I will not let this incident fade into the shadows. I will ensure it gets the attention it deserves. Just then, a woman from the crowd stepped forward, holding her phone aloft. I have it all on video. We all saw what happened. Her voice rang clear, and a ripple of excitement coursed through the crowd. Good, Angela said, her expression fierce. Let the world see the truth. Let them see how you treated me, Officer Blake. Let them see how you wield your badge as a weapon against those you're supposed to protect. As the crowd erupted in cheers once more, Angela felt invigorated. She had stepped into a role that transcended her position as a judge. She had become a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for those who had faced similar injustices. The moment felt monumental, a turning point not just for her, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. Officer Blake, cornered by the collective strength of the people around him, realized he had underestimated the power of accountability. He took a step back, the realization dawning on him that his actions would have repercussions far beyond this moment. The crowd was not going to let him off easily. They were ready to fight for justice. Angela, let's get out of here, one of her supporters urged, sensing the tension still crackling in the air. No, she replied firmly, her gaze unwavering. This is where we stand. This is where we make our voices heard. I will not be silenced or intimidated. We will take this to the highest level. With that, Angela turned back to the crowd, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. We are here today to demand change. We will not rest until justice is served, and I will lead the charge. The crowd roared in response, their energy a powerful reminder that together they could challenge the status quo and fight against the injustices that plague their community. The vibrant city had transformed into a battleground of voices, a cacophony of outrage and determination. Following the shocking incident involving Angela and Officer Blake, the streets were alive with protests demanding police accountability. Banners emblazoned with slogans like "Justice for Angela" and "End Police Brutality" fluttered in the wind, carried by a throng of passionate supporters. Angela stood at the forefront, her presence commanding attention as she rallied the crowd, her voice resonating with power and conviction. "Enough is enough," she shouted, her words carrying over the sea of faces turned toward her. "This isn't just about me. It's about every single person who has faced injustice. We must hold those in power accountable for their actions." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy palpable as they echoed her sentiments, chanting her name in unison. Angela's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and determination. She had never envisioned herself as a figurehead of a movement, yet here she was, driven by the urgency of her mission. The video recordings that had captured the brutal encounter with Blake had gone viral, igniting conversations about police conduct, systemic racism, and the urgent need for reform. She felt the weight of her position as a federal judge, knowing that her voice carried significant influence, and she vowed to use it. Meanwhile, the courtroom was abuzz with anticipation as the case against Officer Blake unfolded. The atmosphere was electric, filled with journalists and onlookers eager to witness justice in action. Angela sat in the front row, her demeanor composed, but her heart racing as she prepared to confront the man who had tried to strip her of her dignity. As the proceedings commenced, the judge presiding over the case called for the first witness. It was one of the bystanders who had recorded the incident, a young man named Marcus. He took the stand, visibly nervous but resolute. "I just couldn't believe what I was seeing," he began, his voice shaky but growing steadier with each word. "I thought we were past this kind of abuse. When Officer Blake shoved her, I knew I had to record it. No one should go through that." The prosecution presented the video evidence, and the courtroom fell silent as the footage played. Gasps erupted from the audience as the scene unfolded in front of them, capturing the raw brutality of the encounter. Angela felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Anger, sadness, but also a fierce pride in the community that had rallied to support her. She had transformed from a victim into a beacon of hope. As the trial progressed, more witnesses came forward, each recounting their experiences and the impact of the incident. The testimonies painted a vivid picture of not just the confrontation, but also the broader issues at play: systemic discrimination and a culture of silence that had long protected officers like Blake. Angela listened intently, her resolve only strengthening with each passing moment. When it was finally her turn to testify, Angela stood before the court, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest. She took a deep breath, centering herself before speaking. "I am not just here as a judge, but as a woman who was assaulted and humiliated in front of many," she began, her voice unwavering. "What happened to me is a reflection of a systemic problem that affects countless individuals. It is time we bring these issues into the light." Her words carried weight, resonating with those present. She spoke passionately about the importance of accountability and the need for reforms in law enforcement practices. Every person, regardless of their background or appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. We cannot allow fear or prejudice to dictate our interactions with one another, she implored, earning nods of agreement from the audience. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Angela's heart raced as she exchanged glances with her supporters, their expressions a blend of hope and anxiety. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict. The room held its breath as the foreman stood up. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Blake, guilty of misconduct," he announced, his voice steady. The words hung in the air, and a wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Angela's eyes filled with tears as the realization sank in. Justice had been served. The crowd erupted in applause, a chorus of relief and triumph echoing throughout the space. Officer Blake's face contorted in disbelief as he absorbed the news. He had entered the courtroom with an air of arrogance, convinced that his badge would shield him from consequences. Now, as the reality of his actions settled in, the color drained from his face. The judge's gavel struck, and the room quieted once more as the presiding judge addressed the consequences of Blake's actions. "In light of the evidence presented and the gravity of the misconduct, I hereby sentence Officer Blake to community service and mandatory training on police conduct and ethics," the judge stated firmly. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Some felt it was a step forward, while others believed it fell short of true accountability. Angela, however, felt invigorated by the outcome. She had not only fought for her dignity, but had also ignited a movement that would ripple through the community and beyond. As she left the courthouse, flanked by supporters, she could feel the shift in the air. Individuals were inspired to speak out, to stand up against injustice, and to demand change. "Angela, you did it!" a young woman exclaimed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You showed us that we can fight back." Angela smiled warmly, her heart swelling with pride. "This isn't just my victory, it's ours. Together, we can create a system that values justice and equality for all." As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the city, Angela felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to lead the charge for reform. The fight against injustice was far from over, but with the community rallying behind her, she knew they could effect change. The story of Angela's bravery would echo through the streets, inspiring others to rise up against oppression and demand accountability. In the face of adversity, she had transformed her pain into power, reminding everyone that dignity and justice are worth fighting for. Because when individuals stand together, they can dismantle the walls of injustice and build a future rooted in respect and equality.